Highguard is an FPS MOBA that gained notoriety for being overly hyped by Jeff Keighley at the Game Awards, and it just released. And, well, things aren't going so great. It launched on Monday, and within hours it had racked up over 5,000 mostly negative reviews. And as of writing this, it's tripled that to 15,000. That said, I've been playing it since it launched, and while I agree that it's got plenty of issues and probably shouldn't have launched in the state that it's in, I don't think it's quite so deserving of all the negativity it's received. Or at least the situation isn't quite so black and white. Let's talk about it, but first I have a word from today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by the new tactical 5v5 shooter PUBG Blind Spot. It's a free-to-play competitive PvP game that's built around teamwork. And while PUBG might be a mega hit franchise, Blind Spot is being built as more of a indie experience, giving the devs the freedom to really experiment and react quickly to player feedback. Right off the bat, it's got some cool mechanics like shared vision combat, where the fog of war is based on all of your teammates, letting you really coordinate your vision on the map. Blind Spot also has two main modes, TDM and Search and Destroy, so you can switch between the more casual and competitive experiences. It's launching in early access on February 5th. Click the link in the description to wishlist PUBG Blind Spot today. Alright, getting back to Highguard. This is a free-to-play PvP game developed by some former devs from Respawn that worked on games like Titanfall and Apex Legends, and it's not hard to see their influence in the movement and weapon mechanics. But the real question that most people had leading up to the release is, what the heck even is Highguard? The gameplay was not explained at all from the reveal, and probably because they would have had to say that Highguard is an FPS MOBA, a game that would be immediately compared to Valve's upcoming Deadlock, a comparison that will inevitably not favor the game. In Highguard, two teams of 3 players, that's right, only 3 players per team, fight over shield breakers, these big ol' swords which spawn at a random spot on the map. Whoever holds the shield breaker can use it to break the shield, protecting the other team's base. From there, you can plant bombs at various points on the enemy base to damage its total health. The first team to knock a base down to 0 health wins the game, and you get to play as different characters which have different abilities and ultimates. Pretty straightforward sounding, especially for folks who have played games like Dota or League. But there's more, for better or worse. The bases are separated by a big multi-lane map with tons of chests and resources that you can gather. These chests contain weapons and armor upgrades, and you can also use the crystal resources that you can mine around the map to buy upgrades and ammo. However, unlike most other MOBAs, the map is entirely empty otherwise. There's no mobs or towers to prevent you from just exploring it well. The only time that you'll run into any resistance is if you run into other players, which isn't that common because, again, there's only 3 players per team on a fairly large map. Now, to get around quickly, you can use a mount that you can spawn at any time. There's also zip lines and mantling and stuff that make it a little bit more movement-y as a game. And visually, the game isn't bad. I'll be honest, when playing through the tutorial, I was thinking, all right, this could actually be pretty good. It's got an interesting fantasy vibe. It feels in line with the production quality you would expect from any sort of big-name title. The sound effects are fun. The UI is high quality. Money was clearly spent on this game. And they're at least trying with the world crafting to do something somewhat new. Planting a shield breaker at an enemy base causes a massive battering ram to come out of this portal. It's pretty darn cool looking, I have to admit. But beyond a few of those more inspired visuals, the rest of the design feels pretty safe and predictable. It doesn't feel like Highguard was somebody's passion project, if that makes sense. It feels more like it was designed by a committee. And that's kind of how the gameplay feels as well. In fact, for the level of production quality around the visuals, the gameplay feels like the least tested. Not in the sense that the movement or shooting doesn't feel good. They mostly do. In fact, the mechanics on their own feel pretty solid. This dev team can absolutely make a game, but the design team feels like they just didn't know what the gameplay was going to be until the end. And, well, honestly, the gameplay's pretty boring. Each match basically comes down to fighting over the shield breaker spawn, this Uber sword. Whichever team wins that fight basically gets to do some damage to the enemy team's base and take down the base's shield for an opportunity to do even more damage. You can actually kill a base real quick. I had matches last all of 8 minutes total. Each base has 3 objectives that you can plant bombs on, A, B, and an anchor stone, but the anchor stone deals 70 damage when it's destroyed, and taking down the shields does 30, so if you just go for the anchor stone, you basically kill the base, kind of robbing you from any sort of sequential experience. There's almost no point in attacking the other objectives, just go for the anchor stone. There's also no towers or mobs to slow you down, only another team of 3, and if they're not on point, well, the match is going to go very fast. Now, like MOBAs, you can earn progressively better gear as the match goes on. You need to roam around the map getting chests and mining crystals to use as your currency in shops, and it's actually an important element of winning since you'll want to outgear your opponents. But sadly, this loot goblin gameplay side is really boring. Without the mobs and towers on this larger map, it just feels kind of like you're playing an underwhelming looter game. You can tell that the people who came up with Titanfall's movement system worked on Highguard because the movement is seamless and intuitive. Jumping on your mount, sprinting to a zip line, zipping across a big open space, then landing back on your mount. It feels pretty darn slick. Gunfights are a bit chaotic since everyone has shields and big health pools, but if you use your character's abilities, you can really soften up the enemy team and cut the time to kill way down. I favored the lightning character that has AoE shock spears and an ultimate that basically Zeus smites the enemy team, and I got multiple team wipes using these abilities. Awkwardly, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interesting counter gameplay that you might find in other hero shooters where some heroes specifically counter another. There are some characters with abilities like ice walls or ultimates that give them a ton of HP, but even then the walls are pretty easy to blow up or get around. It feels like they wanted this combat to be a bit more involved, but that they just didn't quite get it there yet. And from the combat side specifically, it just doesn't feel as good as other hero shooters, which it kind of has to be if you're going to compete with them. I have a hard time imagining this competing with Deadlock even if you gave it another year of refinement. There's just a lot of design flaws, or rather design work to do beyond this point if you're going to make the combat more interesting. Now, sadly, in addition to the experience being somewhat whelming on the gameplay side, it also has some serious performance issues. When I first loaded into the tutorial, I was getting like 70 FPS at max settings with DLSS enabled on a good PC. And in the action, you can really feel the inconsistent FPS. Dropping the settings to medium didn't make much of a difference either. The performance feels quite out of line with the visuals, and especially considering that this is supposed to be a fast-paced, competitive FPS, I mean, you gotta get the frame rate working. I mean, at least working better. As for bugs beyond that, I didn't really see anything too egregious, which is good. I'll give them some credit for that. People have reported issues joining matches or keeping matches alive with entire teams bailing from them, but I think maybe some of that is more launch day growing pain issues. Really, my biggest complaint with Highguard is that the whole game mode just feels like it was designed by someone who didn't know what they wanted it to be. The gameplay doesn't feel inspired. It feels like a lot of high quality components tossed together without a clear direction for what it's supposed to play like. It's an FPS MOBA with big maps, lanes, loot, a shop economy, and bases. But there's no mobs, no towers, or objectives outside of the bases, no lane bosses, only 3 players. And despite the bases having multiple objectives to attack, only one of them really seems to matter, and you can just attack it directly. Trying to do the same thing in a traditional MOBA against a team with any common sense is a great way to give them the ace and flip the momentum of the entire match. But in Highguard, it's the fastest way to win a game. It just feels like the mode isn't designed around clear rules that require teamwork and specific skill sets. Despite MOBAs seeming simpler because they have traditionally been top-down games, they're actually quite complicated and they need clear and good vision from the start. Highguard feels like it's trying to figure out the gameplay in the final stages of development, and it's just not working. Now, sadly, the thousands of negative reviews this game is getting on Steam don't really paint a full picture. The combination of hype and lack of information really put Highguard under a microscope, and gamers love to punish any missteps. It is a free-to-play game, and if the devs had sort of released it and said, hey, this is early access, we're experimenting with a new game concept, I think the audience would have been much more forgiving. But because of the crazy lead up to this, people are being much more critical. And it is a game with some good ideas. It's just in a sea of half-baked ones that launched early with major performance issues and what feels like, well, frankly, a lot of missing features and needed work on the overall gameplay. Again, it's free to play though, so it's only going to cost you some hard drive space and some of your time to check it out for yourself. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think the community is being too hard in the reviews? Let me know in the comments. And up next, if you want to see Battlefront 2 basically being turned into Battlefront 3, check out this video here. The modding scene for Battlefront 2 is going crazy, and it is absolutely worth your attention. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.